Hello and welcome to the Zach Ratliff Show. I'm Zach. This is Denny Burdine.
How are you?
Thanks for being with us. Thank you all for watching. I want to start out by thanking my sponsors, Mortgage Financial here in Texarkana, Elmwood Custom Goods, who created the beautiful sign behind me, and Church on the Rock, Texarkana. That's churchontherock.org. All right, this is Denny Burdine. He was uh, been around him my whole life, and then common guest on the radio show when we were doing that.
Yeah,
So
that was fun. I enjoyed that.
yeah, and so first time here, Coach. Let me just let you kind of give your background for everybody who doesn't know, and then we'll jump into it.
Well, I coached and taught most of my life. I say, most of my life for almost 40 years. And I taught U.S. history and economics. And the main thing that I loved, though, was politics, government and politics. And I taught college classes in that, college level classes called AP classes. And so I got kind of involved with that. And I love to hunt and fish and do things, but the main thing right now, my granddaughter and I, we show cattle. We go all over the country
And I
showing
see y'all
Cimarron
going
cattle.
everywhere.
But it's fun. It's competitive. It kind of keeps that competition that I was around all the time coaching going in me, and we've done well. Matter of fact, she won a national championship a few weeks ago in Madison, Wisconsin, with her cow calf pair that we raised. So it's been fun. I've enjoyed that. But I still think politics every day and watch the news and still read a lot. I try to read about 25 books a year to stay up on things. So that's kind of my life, basically.
Well, and you're the reason that I realized I had to start reading the Federalist Papers.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And so I'm making it's not something you can just sit down and I can't just sit down and dive into all of them, but I'm slowly reading a couple a night.
Yeah, that's the way it is. It's almost like the Bible. You really got to get into it to put it to tie all the pieces together. But like Jefferson said one time, said the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution not near as important as the Federalist Papers because they explain why everything was done at the Constitutional
Yeah,
Convention.
well, and using the Bible as an example, it's like when somebody's like, "Oh, well, this is what the Bible says." Well, and you can go read a commentary by Augustine or somebody else, and say like, "Okay, here's all the meat to
Exactly.
that." That's what the
Exactly.
Federalist Papers are,
Exactly
right?
right. I agree 100%.
Well, with you and your experience in teaching government and just studying history and all that, we've got a lot going on right now. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a crazy time.
we have a unique situation in politics in America right now. We have a Republican Party who basically controls everything from the state level on up. If you really want to think about it,
Yeah.
they're in charge of everything. So they have really stepped forward doing things, and so it's a team of action. I mean, everything's going quickly. Trump does things so fast that people can't even keep up with it, and that's good. But also, we've exposed a lot of things I think that hasn't been on the up and up in the last few years, and I like all that. I think people now feel more free to just speak what they think instead of worrying about that they're going to be, condemned for their public speaking and stuff like that.
Right.
And that brings out the truth. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, you talk about Trump moving so fast. He didn't have a press conference for 2 days over the
I
weekend.
saw that.
And next thing you know, they're like, "Is this guy dead?"
Right, exactly right.
He he must be just a different kind of monster. They're so used to hearing and seeing from him that in my life I can't remember it ever being that way.
No, I think that probably the three presidents that are probably the most have the most energy to get things done would be Abraham Lincoln with all the things that he was facing, and then the other is Franklin Delano Roosevelt
Uh-huh.
coming in with the Great Depression and then World War II coming in, and then Trump. It amazes me a person his age. He's older than I am, but not that much older than I am. That he can go as fast as he can with as little sleep as he can. It's as you get older, things slow down a little bit. Now I'm going to tell you.
Right, but I mean, yeah, his mental capability just must be, and I'm a I like his policies, but I'm not always a fan of everything he does. Don't get
Right.
me
Oh,
wrong, but
exactly.
just the way he processes things. Of course, he's also surrounded himself by good people
It,
in my
he
mind.
he has to have a lot of advisors because you couldn't sit around and think of all the things that he goes and attacks. Every day there's something new.
Right.
And the opposition can't keep up because time they're arguing with one thing he's doing, he's got something new going on.
Yeah.
So it's pretty unique situation anyway.
Well, let's go into that. Let's go. He's moved the National Guard into Washington D.C., but that wasn't. After the fires out in California, he moved them into Los Angeles,
Right.
and caught a lot of hard time, a lot of grief from Gavin Newsom and whatever that mayor out there, whatever her name is. But all of a sudden, all that settled down and he didn't get any credit for it. Well, then the same thing's happening in Washington, D.C. By all reports, and even like citizen journalists and stuff going out and talking, everybody that lives up there feels safer. But constitutionally, he can do that in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes, that's a federal district there, and it's different than going into the state areas that are run by state governments and everything. And what I think about is okay. So I can see him keeping control of DC and keeping things going there because that's where diplomats come to. That's an important place for us.
Right.
It's our image. It's like your house, your yard being your image. But going into Chicago and places like that, I don't know how that'll work out. Once you're in there and you eventually leave, do things just go right back the way they were?
Well, that's what I'm worried about with D.C.
Yeah, well, that could happen too, but it depends on what leadership comes along later. I always like this quotation. Not a quotation, but I read a book called The Gospels, which is talking about the founding fathers and what they believed religiously and how they tied it into our country. And one thing was said if God did not demand obedience from those that He created, who are men to try? So if you think about that, if God gives us free will and we go do all these bad things, then can man really stop all that?
Right.
And that's kind of what I look at with Trump. Okay, so we've got crime, in Chicago. I mean, that's just that everyone knows it.
Something shot over the
Yeah,
weekend.
53 or whatever. They need help. There's no doubt about that. But what do? It goes back to something deeper than just policing the streets. It goes back to morality, and it goes back to how kids are taught as they grow up. And I think taking religion out of our society has really hurt all of that, and so it's uphill battle.
Well, that's one thing that I've obviously not an original thought because I think a lot of us have it, but the farther we get from prayer in school and morals in school and religious morals in school, the worse it's gonna get.
Oh, exactly.
And I think, but then, and this is a constitutional issue too, and we'll kind of come back to the National Guard and stuff, but but then like Texas mandating that the Ten Commandments be in every classroom.
Right.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
I agree.
I think you should be able to pray in school. If a teacher wants to have the Ten Commandments in there, they should have. But I don't want to force somebody that's going to tell you why it's all wrong.
Exactly. And you got to realize now, when you open that up, you're opening it up for all religions, and that may be good for kids to see different religions and everything. But you're pretty well when you put the commandments up and you do daily Bible readings and stuff like that. It becomes very touchy constitutionally. The very famous case, Engel versus Vidal, where I think it was in New York that the school board decided that they were going to do prayer every day, and so they were ruled against, and then they started doing it over the intercom, and then they made it for the kids to do it when they wanted to on their own and things like that. But keeping religion out of the classroom is it's hard to do. And the great thing about being a football coach, I could teach morality, and doing right things like that. But in the classroom, it's a different ball game. You can't do that. You're there to teach a subject. Right. Is what you're there to do. And religion and politics should stay out of it, even though it doesn't.
Right. And it doesn't by either side.
No, not exactly. Both sides just as guilty as the other. I promise you on that.
Yeah, that's exactly. So then why then could Trump move the National Guard into Washington, D.C.? Because if we remember after January 6th, everybody's like, oh, Trump wouldn't bring it in because he didn't. But he said, well, I didn't have permission from the mayor.
Right.
Well, why is this different now that he took over in place of the mayor?
When I look at the presidency, I mean, here's what you have to realize. At the Constitutional Convention, when the 13 freed states from Britain got together, some of them are thinking they're their own countries. We have 13 countries here. But they realized that they were going to be weak, so they had to unite together, and the old Articles of Confederation no good. So they set up and drew up a new constitution. And when it came to the two major issues that they had to debate on everything that came up, as far as creating our Constitution, the number one thing was state rights versus the federal government's rights.
Right.
And the second thing, obviously, was slavery.
Yeah.
And I've said before, the Constitution is a pro-slavery doctrine, is it in its original form, when it was set up. But the question is, if you're going to give your rights up to the state, to the federal government, to be unitized into this country called the United States of America, what rights do you retain? What do you keep and what do you give? Are you willing to give the federal government? And this was one debate after another. Everything that came up that was debated, because the smaller states especially are saying we're going to lose all our power.
Right.
And so we want to keep our power. But you also got to realize that when the Constitution was written, the president was given power, and his main power is he's called the commander in chief, which means he's in charge of the military. He's also the manager in chief, which means he manages the government. He's the head of our government. He's the diplomat in chief, which means he deals with foreign countries all the time. So he's got a lot of responsibility. But the number one responsibility is to enforce legislation passed by Congress.
So
That's his
he's
number
the
one rule.
number one law
He is the
enforcement
number
agent.
exactly. That's what his number one job is, and people don't realize it. They think that he's a guy giving speeches and meeting diplomats from foreign countries, and that's part of his scope of his duties. But the main thing is to protect people's lives and property. And they don't even mention liberty when we talk about that. It's lives and property. So when
Okay.
he looks out across America, and his job is to protect the American people's lives and their property, when he sees things going wrong in these cities and the states aren't doing what they're supposed to do, he
That's his
feels
deal.
like I've got to go do something. And
Okay.
then you get into that what is it called? The Insurrection
Yeah.
Act of 1803 or whatever it was, whatever year that was. I think it's 1803, 1807, which says that he can go in and put down uprisings or insurrections or also civil disobedience
Right.
when, criminals are taking over controls of cities and stuff like that.
Which
So-
the negative side of that is back in before the 40-hour work week and before the labor laws, that was kind of used as a way to put down strikes and
exactly.
things like that. So I mean,
Exactly.
we've seen it go the wrong way
I agree.
historically. What was it, 1897 or something? Well, it was kind of what coming off the Labor Day weekend was the genesis of Labor Day to celebrate workers because they had just put down a few strikes with the National Guard or the Army or military or whatever it was.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, it's just a touchy situation. And then you got this second little law called Posse Comitatus,
Uh-huh.
which basically says is that federal troops cannot be used to enforce federal laws or federal legislation. And this came about because at the end of the Civil War, they took the South and divided into military zones to
Right.
protect freed slaves and so forth, freed men, and they left the military there.
Right.
They left them there till 1878. And Rutherford B. Hayes, you got a divided election that year, and Hayes makes the promise, I'll get the troops out. Just make me president, in
Right.
the House of Representatives. So he started getting a bunch of votes, especially from the Southern people. So he pulls the troops out. And that was one of the things that the reason to that. I'm getting the troops out because they're not here to enforce law. Local authorities should enforce law. So to
Gotcha.
me, those two pieces of legislation, those two actions butt heads with each other.
Okay.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I'm with you.
But it's a touchy situation. Like I say, the locals are going to push to keep the president and federal troops out. And the one thing you don't want to do is to start using federal troops at the local level because you're leading yourself toward a military state when you do that.
You're getting a Korea
And I don't care
or
if
a
it's
China
Trump or who. I don't care if you support Trump, you don't support him. You've got to be careful of that because that's what way dictatorships begin.
Right.
Military dictatorship.
Well, because if your guy can do it, then the next guy can do it, and he might be not be
Exactly.
willing to give up power.
Exactly. And the whole purpose of the National Guard, it is a state militia. Every state has its own National Guard. And their job, to begin with, in the Second Amendment, is to be used against the federal government if it becomes abusive.
Right.
Okay. So it's good that each state controls its own military, so-called, within reason. And then the president, if things really get bad, he can go in and deputize the National Guard of the state and use it to bring law and order when, disorder takes place.
And so is that why in the D.C. stuff that we're seeing, which by all accounts has been very successful, but it's National Guards from different states because D.C. is a part of no state. Is that why
That's
you're
true.
seeing different states?
It's a federal district. You're exactly right. It's exactly right. And you think, and they have a governor there, and they have what do they have? I think they have 3 electoral votes or something like that. I
something
believe
like that.
But you would think the president being in charge of the government, and that is a federal district, he could do pretty well what he wanted to in that area.
Which the way I looked at it.
Yeah.
So what was it? I think it was, and you might correct me on this, 1975 or 76 is when they put a mayor into D.C. Until then, it was completely run by the U.S.
Yeah,
Congress.
I'm not aware of that. I don't know much about that. But
I think it's sometime in the 70s is when they even got a mayor and all that. Until then, it was just responsible. The president and the Congress in dealing with the country also had to run D.C.
And DC is a unique situation, being marked off with a certain amount of square miles or whatever it is. And then it all came about where its location's at because of Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton in a debate over Hamilton wanted the states to pay the debts that they owed after the American Revolution. And a lot of the states said they would. Some states said, no, we're not paying anything.
Right.
And so Hamilton's going to go down as being the Secretary of the Treasury if he can't get this money in. So he goes to Jefferson. They have a big meeting and they have a meal one night. And he says, look, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll let you move the capital down toward the south on the Potomac and set it up, where it's at present day,
Right.
if you will support me in getting money to pay off our national debts. So it's
Right.
kind of funny how it was all set up to begin with.
Yeah. But as you've said many times, the Constitution and everything in the development of our government was a negotiation. So the stalemates that we come to now is like, well, and you've always said this, the Congress was made to move slow.
Deliberately and slow. They have to. They got to be cautious about what they do.
And so, but this is not something that's new. This is
No,
250 years old, this fight.
It's the same procedures, but I think the radical movements on both sides, sometimes pushing down the political spectrum toward fascism, they'll call it on the right, and toward communism, socialism on the left. We kind of left our center of
Right.
gravity, if you think about it that way. So the ideologies of both sides have gotten far out there. They really have.
Well, and that, kind of tying back into the Ten Commandments thing, or even if we were going to talk about the flag burning thing that Trump wants to do, it's a reaction, which trying to be a correction for a reaction from the other side. But I think there's so many unintended consequences with this, especially on Trump saying, "Hey, you're going to get a year in jail if you burn a flag."
Right.
Well, that's a First Amendment violation from the way I understand it.
Flag burning is symbolic free speech. You don't say a word, you just burn the flag. You don't have to say a word. Now, if you go out and burn a flag and it creates a riot or a clear and present danger,
Now
then you have a problem. You're going to jail. But just to go out and burn a flag and voice your opinion, it ties into another case, and I think that case, Johnson versus Texas in 1989 is when that case took place. And Johnson, the Supreme Court backed him, saying he could burn the flag as long as it didn't create a clear and present danger, damage to property and stuff like that. But there was another one before that during the Vietnam War that was called Tinker versus Des Moines, where kids wore black armbands to school to protest the Vietnam War.
Right.
The principal sent them home. The principals knew that the meeting took place the night before,
Right.
so they were ready on them when they come to school the next day. And so they sent them home. And when the Supreme Court ruled, they said your constitutional rights and free speech and expression do not stop at the schoolhouse gate.
Right.
You can carry it right into the classroom as long as you don't disrupt the school.
Right.
And so an armband on you is that's your silent protest, but you're just voicing your opinion. Now, if I'm going down the road and I see a bunch of guys on horses and they got white robes on with pointed hoods on, I know what they are.
Right.
And so they made their statement without ever saying a word to me.
As long as they just keep riding,
oh yeah,
they're allowed to do that.
If you do this right here, Heil Hitler or whatever, I know what your thinking is.
Right.
So that's your symbolic free speech. So I think that Trump's pushing that issue. I don't think he'll win that issue.
And so that's one of the things where I'm like, I don't agree with him at all on this. And now it's an overreaction from I think, and I don't know, they don't invite me to the meetings, but I think it's a correction from, you can't go on pride flags painted on the streets, and so
Right.
I think that's what he's trying to do. Whereas, even one of the cases, and this came from golly, I quoted her on the show. I can't remember, but there's a case where someone got arrested for burning the pride flag, but it was because they stole that flag.
Okay.
And then caused a riot.
Right.
And then there was so much more around it. It wasn't because of the flag, it was for all the crimes around burning that flag.
Exactly. I've said it before and you've heard me say it. There's no such thing as absolute in the Bill of Rights.
Right.
Nothing is absolute. There's no absolute right of religion. There's no absolute right of free speech. There is just no absolute rights. There's always limits. It's how far you want to push it. And when you start infringing on the rights of others, the whole Bill of Rights was set up for one simple concept: protect you and me from an abusive government. That's what it's all about. People don't understand that.
Right.
This is to protect us from the federal government when they become abusive to it. And that's why so much of the Bill of Rights is based on your rights in court and fair and speedy trials and things like that, and freedom from searches of your property and rights of religious freedom and so forth.
Well, and then yeah, all that ties together. But you like you say, your rights can't infringe on my rights, and
Exactly
can't
right. Correct.
because when they do, then now that's a problem,
That's true.
and then
That's
that's
true.
where the Constitution comes in and say, okay, you've got this, but this person also
Right.
has these
And when you
rights.
think about putting the 10 Commandments in the classroom, you're going right down that road, that slope
Yeah.
right there. So what
Uh-huh.
about the other religious kids sitting in the classroom
Yeah, I
right
want
there?
a copy of the, the Hadith, and I want a
Exactly right.
copy of this, and I want,
Exactly. And so that's what you get into. And to me, that becomes a disruption to school day, when you start doing stuff like that. But I do know that in my study of history, the liberal movements that came about by the Supreme Court giving more rights to the criminals and the victims. And a lot of this happened with even some conservative judges on there. I think it was the Burger Court that did a lot of all of this. I'm thinking, I can't really remember. Uh, but anyway, that becomes a controversial deal that you start doing away with your morals of your country and you start going down this road of taking away who you really are.
right.
And the founding fathers, I'm not saying they were all. I mean, some of them were agnostic. Some may have even been atheists, but they believed most of them believed in providence. That God had a say so in what went on. The battles that Washington was able to survive and win, they think God had a hand in it. That America is a country that's based on a God, and
Yeah.
it is called public. I think I've told you before. There's two types of religion in America: public religion and private religion.
Mhm.
Perfect religion is such things that when the government supports religion that leads to morality and it leads to lack of chaos and law and order and people
Right.
doing the right things, that's public law. So when we say on our coins, when we say in God we trust, that's public religion. It's just
Yes.
law, I meant religion. That's public religion. And when we God bless America, that's public religion. Now, private religion is what you do in your church in your home.
Right.
Now, you can't bring that into the government.
Right.
You should not bring that into the government. But don't think for 1 minute that the government has the right to abuse religion. It can kind of govern and kind of separate it, that wall of separation that Jefferson talks about.
But it's not constitution. It's not
No,
in the
no,
Constitution.
it's not. And what Jefferson said, there's a wall of separation between the state and religion. It's not between the religion and politics.
Right.
That's two different things.
Yeah.
And so religion and politics mingle together, and you see that when the voting takes place.
Uh-huh.
But the separation of the church and state should be separate.
Yeah, because just like the Church of England, that's because what was it, Henry the Eighth? I don't know.
I know Henry VIII. I mean, he did a lot of things.
I think whichever one killed all his wives.
Yeah, I
and
think
then,
it was Henry VI or Henry VIII.
okay, yeah, I couldn't remember. And then, but it was so he could have a divorce, which is why they,
which church wouldn't let him have. Exactly.
So that's what you get when you have a state tied to the church, or even in Iran when you have state and church.
Theocracy.
The mullahs run.
Right, they run everything.
Yeah,
exactly.
so that's what we're trying.
But the Anglican Church, in England, if you don't want to go to church, you don't have to go, but you better send your money. You better send your money, because
exactly
that's what it's going to be.
They're going to come get it. Now, when you said one thing about a country based on God and what Washington believed, it's not taught in history almost at all, I don't think.
No.
But Washington was considered the bulletproof president. He when it was his hat and his cloak.
Yeah, the Battle of Fort Dequay or whatever, when he went as since he surveyed, he knew the territory, and he always wanted to be an officer in the British Army, if the truth is known.
Right.
So he goes with General Braddock, and they go to attack a French colony or fort, I should say, and they get hammered. And Washington, he's back at the back of the troops, and I think he had hemorrhoids. He couldn't ride a horse. He said he can't get on a. They put him on a pillow on the saddle to send him up to the front. But what you're trying to get to, I think, is when he was up there, he gets shot several times. He's got bullet holes in his shirt and in his boots and everything, and from Indians, and they finally quit shooting at him because they thought he was God sent. So yeah,
and even I believe he even had a horse shot out from
under. Oh yeah. I think he had several horses shot out.
And so if ever there was providence around a person,
exactly,
the guy that shows up with a bunch of bullet holes in his clothes and he's not shot, probably.
And remember, he's the guy that when he was sworn in to be president, he finishes up by, what does he say? So help me God. He added that. George Washington did. He added that to the swearing in of the president. So, and he wasn't what I would call just 100% Like if you talk about Jefferson, he's not sure about Jesus Christ. He's
Right.
kind of in and out of the deal.
Yeah.
But on his deathbed, and as he's moved towards his death, he'd made the statement, "I can't wait to go reunite with my family after death." So that tells you there that they believe in life hereafter and things like that.
Right.
So religion's always been a part of these guys and government too.
Well, and that's an interesting thing that you even brought that into it because we're told so much that it wasn't. But and I can't remember, one of the founders or writers said, the Constitution without morals doesn't exist. Like
Exactly.
there's no way to have it.
Right. That's what I call public religion.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
use public religion to keep the morality of your country where it's going. We've lost that.
yeah,
We've lost that
absolutely.
in America. You can see it with our young kids.
Yeah, you can see it in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, well, and that's even, I often talk about the 45 tenets of communism that was read into the congressional record. I've got this memorized on January 10th, 1963. So they read, here's the plans of communism that they're going to try. And number one is get religion out of the public square.
Right.
Like, then it's
Right.
the deterioration of the family. Then it's dependency on government. And then, everything else that follows.
And chaos,
Yeah.
social disorder,
Yeah,
all that. Goes hand in hand.
absolutely.
You're exactly right. But that's it's just that we've kind of lost our way. Sometimes I'd like to ask myself. I used to think religiously that Satan was just something out there fictitiously in the sky somewhere. I do know now that Satan is actively working every single day. And you like to ask yourself, which political party would he join? Well, both of them have their goods and their bads, but which one leans more his way
Yeah.
than the other? And I'm not going to ask you to answer anybody else, but I'm just saying that's kind of the way I look at myself when I go to vote. I said, think about that. Which one is doing the things that Satan really likes that much?
I started reading a new book yesterday. I can't remember the name of it, but it goes on to make the point that, oh no, it wasn't a book. I was listening to a podcast yesterday of Lee Strobel, and he makes the point. I started a book on the Holy Spirit, so I can, but he makes the point that, look, Satan just wanted to be worshipped, and that's all he asked
Mhm.
Jesus to do of him
Exactly.
as well. So
Exactly.
yeah, so to your point, which one
Yeah.
goes with that?
Exactly.
Well, hey, sticking with the Constitution and all that, we have this fight going on in Texas now, and we're seeing it spread to California and to other states on redrawing these congressional districts. Here, I don't understand a lot about it. I don't know why we didn't just say everything that you do has to be a polygraph of some sort, or whatever, a parallelogram, or and however big that is, it has. Why don't we just have squares?
Because when the Constitution Convention took place, again, you've got a conflict between the small states and the large states.
Uh-huh.
So if you're going to have one house of Congress, the unicameral house, which they thought they would have,
Uh-huh.
Delaware, New Jersey, they're wore out now.
Right.
And then big states like Virginia says, well, we got more people living here. We should have more representation in Congress. So between that battle, the great compromise took place, and we come up with two houses. The
Okay.
Senate being equal to everyone, but the House of Representatives is based on population.
So it's
And the next do what now?
how's it? It's like one representative per
Well, it's to
750.
start with, I think it was like 15,000 with one representative. But as it started to grow, by 1929, we're sitting there saying, "Man, we're going to be like the Chinese. We have 5,000 people in Congress."
Right.
So they passed the Apportionment Act. I think it's 1929, which set the number at 435.
Okay.
And then after going back to the Constitution Convention, we have to have a census to know how many inhabitants are found in each state to
Okay.
guarantee them how many representatives.
Okay.
So every 10 years we have a census.
Right.
And a lot of good things come out of the census. You get to predict what the economy is going to do. Are there going to be a bunch of babies being born? And so manufacturers will look at the stats that comes off of the census and say, okay, we need to start making more tricycles or something like
Yeah,
that.
right.
But the main reason for the Constitution is to figure out how many people live in each state and in each zone inside the state, or where they're located in the state, and then decide how many representatives out of that 435 does a state get.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Arkansas at one time had 7 representatives. Now they have 4 because their population has changed over the years.
Okay.
But if you go into Arkansas right now and you look at the zones, this southern zone, Texarkana, goes all the way up past Fort Smith. And the reason is to get enough people in this area to match what's in the Little Rock area.
Okay.
And you go into the Delta, it's the same thing over there.
Hmm.
And so this deciding how many representatives you got is based on population. And this illegal immigration uh, flood that took place,
Right.
Democrats are pretty smart because they don't count citizens in this census. They count inhabitants. They count
Okay.
inhabitants. About the only thing they don't count are people that live outside the country that, not military people, excuse me, but people that live outside the country that still call themselves American citizens. So for every illegal that comes into a state, you've
You
got
get
to
an
you
account.
got to inhabit it. So when you start bringing millions of them in, you're going to have a lot more representatives in Congress.
Right.
Well, that doesn't mean they just create some new seats. It means some other state is going to lose some seats, and you're going to acquire them.
And so if you put them in what you call we say gerrymandering, but it's
It's
Gary.
gerrymandering because it's named in honor of Elbridge Gerry.
But if we put it in gerrymandered sections, that it's saying, okay, all these illegals are going to go here where we already know we've got the vote.
Right.
Then that grows that population to get
Right.
more representatives there.
But what happens in this process? I'll come back. What happens in this process? The all the stats are collected on the census, and then it's sent to the president. It's sent to the clerk of the House, and then the clerk of the House notifies each state. So, okay, your population stayed the same last year.
Mhm.
You don't have to redraw your districts. But like in Arkansas, we know there's a movement up to the northwest right now in Arkansas. So if the population changes in Arkansas, and it's not just how many people you have in the state, it's where do they live. The census tells you where they live too.
Right.
They're saying, look, you've got a big influx of people moving into the northwest, so you got to redraw your lines. And Elbridge Gerry said, "Oh, okay, I can draw these lines to give myself a political advantage."
And so to that point, you can, because I was going through this with one of my friends the other day. He's like, "Hey, how are these? Just I was asking how are these broken up?" And so I was sending some screenshots. Like here in Texarkana, we have Texas U.S. House District 1, and the Red River Army Depot is U.S. House District 4, which goes all the way borders up to Denton,
Yeah.
and then it cuts in, Mount Pleasant, Sulphur Springs, all of that up there, and then it comes right on the edge of Denton, and well, really right on the edge of Lake Louisville is where it hits. Now this one here takes Texarkana, Atlanta, Tyler, Longview, Center, Texas, but it also makes some weird cuts. And okay,
So why they do those weird cuts?
yeah,
Okay, so here's what happens when the census is given to a state and the state knows it has to redraw its districts, and not every state does it every year. I mean, every 10 years. But if they do, then what happens is the governor of that state turns it over to the legislature. The legislature in charge of that state sets the lines the way they want to. They draw the lines. Well, Republicans have a pretty good advantage in that sometimes because most local governments or state governments, 37 or 38 of them are run by the Republican Party. So that's what's happening in Texas right now. They're going in and cutting out people they don't like, but they can set the lines the way they want to, and you can't do anything about it, except for two things. A very famous case is Baker versus Carr, which says that those districts, as they're divided, have to be as equal as possible in population. It's called one man, one vote. So you would want Fort Smith to have 5,000 people, and Little Rock have 2 million, and each one of them have one representative.
So that's where that number comes back.
The number exactly right. So now you got to go in and start cutting through there to get Little Rock as equal as you can to Fort Smith. Okay. And so that's the very famous case. And the other case is Shaw versus Reno, where it cannot be based on race.
Right.
Because what whites did, they went in and cut the blacks into districts. So it's called cracking and packing. I'll put them all in one district and be able to beat them because I got them packed into one district.
Right.
Or I'll crack them apart, spread them out, and dilute their vote. And so that's an evil. So the Supreme Court stepped in and says that gerrymandering is legal, but you can't do it based on unequal representation or population, and you can't do it based on race.
So you can't come in and say, I want the black vote here, so I'm going to.
Well, yeah, the
Mexican vote here.
They'd go through a neighborhood and crack it apart. This side of the street, you're in one district. Over here, you're another. Now, the reason it's called gerrymandering is when people saw what Elbridge Gerry did, they said, that looks like a salamander, the way he drew the lines. Just like a salamander, so we're going to call it gerrymandering.
Okay.
So that's how that come about.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so that being said, is there anything in the Constitution, or 'cause we've talked about the census is every 10 years, but we're Texas is pulling this off right here in the middle of an election cycle, in the middle, outside of a census. So how does that all work?
I don't. I know that within by April the 1st or 9 months after the census has been taken, the report has to go to the president. But I don't know why, if the last census was 2020, that right now Texas is just starting to do what they're doing.
Right.
Right before a midterm, it
Well,
comes
it's
out with
already
a
Republican controlled anyway.
yeah, yeah. But what they've doing, they've got a couple of people they're easing out.
What's her name?
Crockett and
Yeah, Crockett and
someone else. They're easing out.
yeah, Al Green
Yeah,
down in Houston.
yeah, exactly. So they're going to pick up some seats there, and then I guess California is have been approved to redistrict also, and especially since they're losing population and gaining population.
Right.
That's changing constantly
Oh,
there.
for sure. Well, and then, but here's what I find interesting about it. A lot of the Democrat states, New York, uh, Maryland, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, they're already
They abuse it more than
yeah,
Republicans. Yeah, exactly.
there's no more to be gained there.
Exactly.
I think Massachusetts, I think 40% of the vote is Republican, and they get like
Mhm.
20-ish
Yep.
percent of the representatives. So
Because how the lines are drawn.
so really, and this is what I always say about Democrats. Well, you were the one who said this first on my show. The Democrats ride for the brand.
They ride for the brand.
And every time, where Republicans are always like, oh, well, not always, but it often at least we heard saying, oh, we'll try to be fair and try to do it. And
You're right.
it doesn't work to your
and
advantage.
divide themselves up.
Yeah.
So, but that's true, But I see a crack in the Democrats right now. There's some of them that don't ride for the brand anymore,
Which is a new
but
thing.
yeah, it is. And so the media helps to magnify things inside the Democratic Party that you'll think that this way the whole party thinks, but it's not.
Right.
It's not, And the Republicans, they're right now they ride for the brand too, also.
Which, I mean, because
of one person.
Right. And he ain't going to be around.
Exactly right.
That's the thing. Unless, J.D. Vance or somebody can pick up that mantle, which is yet to be seen. Because here's the thing, this presidential term is really just getting going.
Exactly.
I mean, we got a long time to see.
Exactly. There will be certain things that he can do. And then, like you say, and what the other side always does, they're like a little dog that lost it. They just bark is all they can do. They can't do anything, but they know patience. I'll sit here and wait because things are going to change. There will be another Democratic president. There'll be another.
Sure.
The Democratic Party will regain strength, but I think they're going to have to shake loose from some of their ideology because their ideology goes against what mainstream America thinks. A lot of it, I believe.
Well, and I think that's because mainstream America was minimalized so much in the quest to separate anybody, in the quest for power, that there are a lot of people. Even you can look at, Elon Musk, big Democrat, or RFK Jr. I mean, there's no one more Democrat than a Kennedy.
Right.
Or all of a sudden it's been so marginalized and pushed to the fringes. They're like, I don't identify with this anymore.
Exactly, and I understand that. I was a John Kennedy Democrat myself, and but that party didn't exist. Even Bill Clinton's party doesn't exist,
Right.
At all. But I started seeing weaknesses in the Democratic Party with Jimmy Carter, especially when dealing with foreign relations and everything, Iran and Panama Canal. But then before long, you got a guy like Reagan that comes along. He brings a personality in the White House. You got to like him, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, either one.
Right.
And I think Trump's less aggressive now than he used to be. But
I think that's right.
I think he's a little less aggressive. But you can see where he would turn a lot of people. I've got friends on Facebook every day. I got one guy every single day. He's lambasting Trump, and he will never say one word about Biden and the cover-ups and Russiagate. He'll never say a word about that,
Right.
Because this is an older guy. I played ball with him in college. He's reached a stage. This is my ideology. I hate Trump, and I don't care what he does. I'm going to stick with my fight against him, and that's okay. That's part of the American way.
Yeah, and there are now. Look, there are also Trump. Sometimes I'll say something like, "Hey, I don't agree with Trump," and I know people that are like, "How could you be against him?" Well, whoa. First of all, I'm allowed to.
Right.
but I'm not looking for a savior because that guy came to Earth 2,000 years ago and we killed him.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Luckily, he had the ability to get up.
Exactly.
So even if we thought Donald Trump was the savior, our nature is to kill him.
I guarantee you.
And so, but it's amazing how somebody can almost worship these politicians. And then I was in a meeting. I go to the Bowie County Patriots Thursday nights at 6 at Big Jake's, in case anybody wants to join me. But I go to the Bowie County Patriots every Thursday. And there was a politician there visiting. I guess it was last week. Chris Spencer's running for Texas state representative, and and Steve, who comes on the show once a week, probably, was there, and he goes, we're not supposed to be friends with politicians, and
Mhm.
and while it seemed aggressive, that's true. I mean, these people
Right.
work for us, and that's what
Right.
we have
That's
to
true.
remember.
That's true. I just think that both sides sometimes choose battles that they shouldn't choose. Democrats are notorious about it. They'll take transgender, or they'll take abortion, or they'll take, certain things. They'll just drive it into the ground.
Right.
And it's like one time Theodore Roosevelt had this little dog, and he would get in fights with the dogs. He'd get his butt whooped every time. He never won a fight. And so finally one day a reporter said, I've been watching your little dog there. Said, he's not a very good fighter. He said, oh, he's a great fighter. He just he's not very good at choosing the character of other dogs. That's not what he. So that's kind of the way I look at political parties sometimes. They're good fighters, but they just choose the wrong battles.
And that's what we're seeing with Trump right now is he's good at making Democrats defend the 20% side. Trump's finding abstract almost issues that 80% of the people support, and as soon as he comes out that he's for it, like the guy you said on Facebook, there's going to be 20% of people that are like, no, we're against it.
Exactly.
Democrats are taking that side, and then Trump's like,
there you go.
hey, here
So
we
you
go.
you expose everything that's against you.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of all I had, Coach. Did you have any more notes that I know you brought some, and I want to make
I
sure
hadn't
we
had a chance
covered
to
it.
look at them, but we went over. I think that's most everything that I kind of thought about. We did the cracking and packing, did the burning of the flag and everything, and I just think that we made a lot of progress in America, but whether you like it or not, we're going to become more and more global in everything that we do.
Absolutely.
And we've made mistakes in this country depending on other countries. Like I had one of my farmer friends the other day tell me that the drone situation.
Uh-huh.
That the drones are made basically in China.
Yeah.
And if this tariff stuff doesn't work out, they're going to shutting drones down. And what's going to happen is our farmers are going to be in bad shape. They spray their fields and everything with drones.
Well, that's what I'm saying. A lot of people don't understand. I've got a friend up in northeast Arkansas who he flies drones for crop dusting. Like that's his job.
Right.
That's what he does. Is he's on the computer with but he's flying drones, spraying these fields and surveying properties for because it's thousands and thousands of acres. That's the most efficient way to do it.
Oh yeah, the world has changed so much. I heard a farmer the other day that the first combine he ever bought was $335,000, and now they're over $1 million, like $1 to $1.4 million. I don't know how the farmers survive, and the fertilizer that they have to use is all imported, and so we've worked ourselves into a situation becoming more global. Also, gets you depending on more foreign countries,
and that's one thing we have to work away from is we have to take some of the regulations off these farmers so that they can come back to producing and using some of these EPA regulations, which I think they're doing a good job of so far, is so we can start using our own chicken litter and our own all of this stuff so that we can. Because if not, I mean, here maybe we have a better chance. Like how to grow food. But people that don't, like, especially in cities, they're going to eat themselves if this thing's ever shut off. I mean, this will implode quick.
Like the cattle industry right now is unbelievable. You can take a cow and a calf pair, just carry them to the sale barn and get $5,000 for them. It is unbelievable what the prices are. And what's happening is they're not replacing heifers, so there's going to be more of a shortage coming in the future. And so now we're going to depend on Argentina and other countries to bring more beef into the country. So we just do things sometimes that kind of hurts ourselves, the way we do things.
And even on the tariffs with Mexico, a lot of our cattle herd, and I'm not, this probably better than me. There's cattle houses out in El Paso that are holding 250, 500,000 head of cattle. Then they move them to Mexico and graze them down there, then bring them back in to fatten them up before they send them to slaughter. Like, this is a big deal with our cattle industry, and if
The
we're
ca-
not careful, we're going to lose it.
right. The cattle industry's got another big problem coming quickly. It's called the screw fly worm.
It's working its
It's
way up.
coming. It's working its way up. And like yesterday, I was trying to get a heifer bred, thought she's bred, and she wasn't. And then I thought about going back and rebreeding her right now. And I'm saying to myself, she's going to be, the calf will be born in the summer, which is not good because of the heat.
Right.
Then you got flies. And then
Yeah.
if the screw fly worm gets here, if you're not keeping close look at your animals, they'll kill them. And who will really get hurt are deer and wildlife.
Which, is important as well.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, just while we're on the cattle thing, because I just don't know enough to know what I don't know. Um, you see these advertising, no antibiotics in beef and all this. Well, that kind of helps against the screw fly. I mean, there's some of these treatments that you want to be giving these
Yeah,
animals
you're going to
so
have
that
to.
they can be sustainable.
Yeah, because when that fly lands and puts the larva in, it starts eating the flesh. It'll just keep eating the flesh away.
Oh, so it's literally a
It
screw.
eats it. Yeah, it just eats the flesh. They'll eat the flesh on you too. And so you'll have to do antibiotics on them and medication and everything. It's been here before. They had something in the old days called blue something. They said it would stink so bad, but like when a calf is born, you have to put iodine on the navel
Right.
area a lot and things like that. So yeah, it could be devastating on the cattle industry. But right now they're making so much money, people just selling their herds and they're not replacing themselves. So the cattle ranches are starting to deplete. The smaller ones are going downhill,
Right.
but they're making good money right now. But there's a day of reckoning coming. Same way for the farmers. There's always a day of reckoning.
Right. Well, we were just gonna have to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
Well, all right, Coach. Thanks for
I
being here.
appreciate it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
All right, I did too. We'll get you back sometime. All
Okay.
right, everybody. Have a good day, and I hope God blesses each and every one of you.